The roar of the crowd echoed through the vast arena, their cheers merging with the hum of high-tech battle suits and the crackling energy of plasma weapons. Towering above the arena, holographic screens displayed the lineup for the final round, showcasing the galaxy's finest warriors, each equipped with gleaming armor and advanced weapons that made them look more machine than man. In stark contrast, a lone figure stood at the far end of the arena, his head bowed and his body still. Clad in simple robes, the Shaolin monk looked out of place, as though he had wandered into a different era by mistake. His bare feet touched the cold, metallic floor, and the only weapon he carried was the discipline ingrained in his every movement. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. And now, the final match! Representing Earth, a champion of ancient martial traditions, Liang, the Shaolin monk! A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Galactic soldiers, augmented with cybernetic enhancements, exchanged mocking glances. In this galaxy, martial arts were a relic, forgotten and scoffed at in favor of exo-suits and energy shields. To them, Earth's traditions were primitive, outdated, and powerless in the face of modern warfare. Liang remained motionless, his eyes closed, as the next name was announced. And his opponent, Commander Jax of the Syndicate, equipped with the latest battle armor and plasma cannon. Commander Jax, a hulking figure encased in a suit of gleaming black metal, stepped forward with a sneer. His armor hissed as it adjusted to his movements, servos whirring with every step. A plasma cannon was mounted on his shoulder, glowing with a deadly blue light. He glanced at Liang and laughed, a harsh, mechanical sound amplified by his suit's speakers. "This will be over quickly," Jax said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should have brought more than ancient traditions to this fight, monk." Liang opened his eyes slowly, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. He did not speak. Instead, he raised his hands into a familiar stance, his movements slow and deliberate. To the untrained eye, it looked as though he was preparing for a ritual rather than a battle. The crowd erupted into jeers. "Look at him! He thinks he's fighting with his hands against a plasma cannon!" one soldier shouted. Another chimed in. "Earth must be desperate to send this relic to fight." Jax didn't wait for the signal. With a flick of his wrist, the plasma cannon powered up, its hum building to a high-pitched whine. Without warning, a bolt of searing energy shot toward Liang. The crowd gasped, expecting the fight to end before it had even begun. But Liang was already moving. In one fluid motion, he stepped to the side, his body a blur of grace and precision. The plasma bolt missed by inches, slamming into the arena floor and leaving a smoking crater in its wake. The crowd fell silent, shock rippling through the audience as they realized what had just happened. Jax's sneer faltered. He fired again, this time aiming directly at Liang's chest. Again, the monk moved with impossible speed, his robes fluttering as he sidestepped the blast. The energy of the plasma bolt seemed to pass harmlessly by him, as though he were untouchable. "What are you doing?" "Stand still!" Jax growled, frustration creeping into his voice. But Liang did not stop. He continued to move, each step deliberate, his breathing controlled. He was not reacting to Jax's attacks, he was anticipating them. His mastery of qi, the internal energy that flowed through his body, allowed him to sense the slightest shifts in the air, to feel the buildup of energy in the plasma cannon before it fired. To the crowd, it looked as though he was predicting the future, dodging blasts before they were even fired. The jeers from the audience faded into murmurs of disbelief. How could a man, unarmed and unarmored, be holding his own against one of the galaxy's most formidable soldiers? Jax's frustration boiled over. He activated the thrusters on his suit, launching himself into the air. "Enough of this! Let's see you dodge this!" He rained down plasma blasts from above, the air crackling with deadly energy. The arena floor lit up with explosions as the plasma scorched the ground, leaving no room for Liang to escape. The crowd roared, expecting to see the monk disintegrated in the barrage. But as the dust cleared, Liang remained untouched. He had moved so quickly, so effortlessly, that the blasts had missed him entirely. And now, he stood directly beneath Jax, his gaze calm, his breathing steady. Jax landed with a thud, his suit's hydraulics hissing. How? He snarled, his voice filled with disbelief. How are you still standing? Liang said nothing. He stepped forward, his movements deceptively slow. Jax swung his arm, aiming a brutal punch enhanced by the strength of his suit. But before the punch could land, Liang was already inside his guard. With a single, fluid motion, he deflected the blow, using Jax's own momentum against him. The crowd gasped as the massive commander stumbled backward, struggling to regain his balance. His plasma cannon flickered, its power momentarily disrupted. For the first time, doubt flashed in Jax's eyes. He charged again, throwing wild punches, but Liang dodged every strike with minimal effort, his movements calm and controlled. It was as though he was in a dance, and Jax was always one step behind. And then, in a blink, it was over. Liang moved faster than the eye could follow. With a precise strike to Jax's armored chest, he sent a shockwave of chi through the suit, short-circuiting its systems. Sparks erupted from the armor as Jax froze in place, his limbs locked by the malfunctioning exo-suit. The crowd was stunned into silence. Liang stood before his immobilized opponent, his expression serene, as though this had all been a simple exercise. But before the victory could be declared, a new figure emerged from the shadows, someone the monk had not anticipated. And this time, they weren't armed with plasma or technology. They were armed with something far more dangerous. The arena was still, a heavy silence draping over the crowd like a suffocating veil. Jax stood frozen in his malfunctioning armor, his limbs twitching as sparks sputtered from his joints. His once unstoppable plasma cannon now a dead weight, flickering weakly with the remnants of its energy. But no one was looking at Jax anymore. All eyes were on the figure that had stepped forward from the shadows. Liang's muscles tensed. His stance shifted subtly, but enough to show that this new presence demanded his full attention. The figure moved with quiet confidence, their steps deliberate, each one bringing them closer to the center of the arena. The monk could feel it before anyone else, the unsettling ripple in the air, the way the energy shifted as they approached. Who dares interrupt? The announcer's voice faltered as the figure approached, the bravado replaced with uncertainty. The figure was draped in a flowing cloak of dark fabric, masking most of their form. Their face was hidden behind a sleek, silver mask, the kind that reflected everything and nothing at once. No battle suit, no weapons. Yet there was an unmistakable aura of danger surrounding them. It wasn't technology that made them a threat, it was something far more primal, something Liang recognized immediately. I am here to remind you, monk, the figure spoke, their voice low and smooth, that not all battles are won with fists or plasma. The air around Liang felt denser. His instincts sharpened. This wasn't just a fighter sent to finish what Jax had failed to do. This was someone who understood the monk's world, someone who knew the balance of chi, perhaps even better than Liang himself. Who are you? Liang's voice was calm, but there was an edge of wariness. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. The figure tilted their heads slightly, considering the question before answering. A herald. Sent to offer you a choice. You can continue with this charade of a tournament, pretending victory matters here. Or you can face the truth of why you were really sent. The words echoed in the arena, but Liang knew they weren't meant for the crowd. This was a private conversation, cloaked in public spectacle. The tension in the air grew palpable as the figure took another step forward, the ground beneath them vibrating slightly with each movement. Are you implying this fight is meaningless? Liang's voice was steady, but inside, something gnawed at him. The true purpose of this tournament had never been about proving Earth's strength, and now the threads of deception were being pulled tight. The figure chuckled softly, the sound metallic behind the mask. You already know the answer, don't you? This isn't about Earth's honor. It's about control. The Galactic Syndicate has no intention of allowing a mere monk to expose their weaknesses. Liang's eyes narrowed. Expose their weaknesses how? By winning, the figure replied simply. But not in the way you think. You see, the tournament is a distraction, a showpiece. While the galaxy watches these staged battles, The real moves are being made behind closed doors. The syndicate wants to humiliate Earth, make your people seem insignificant. They can't afford for you to win. The crowd, oblivious to the deeper conversation, began to grow restless. They wanted action, not this cryptic exchange. Commander Jack still stood frozen, locked in his ruined armor, forgotten. Liang's thoughts raced. The figure's words rang with truth, a truth he had sensed but hadn't yet confronted. He had entered this tournament as a champion of Earth, but something more was at play here. His mission wasn't just about combat, it was about exposing something far larger, a corruption that reached deep into the heart of the Galactic Syndicate. You were sent to stop me, Liang said quietly, a statement more than a question. Yes, the figure confirmed, their voice smooth as silk. But I won't. Because I believe you are the only one capable of finishing what I started. Liang's brow furrowed. What you started? For the first time, the figure hesitated. There was a long pause, and when they spoke again, their voice was softer, almost regretful. I was once like you, a believer in something pure. But the syndicate, it corrupts everything it touches. Now, I work within the shadows, trying to undo the damage. You, however, you still have hope. You can expose them in a way I never could. The revelation hit Liang like a blow. This wasn't just about a tournament or personal victory. This was about dismantling an entire system of oppression, one that had been manipulating the galaxy for far longer than anyone realized. You want me to tear down the syndicate from the inside, Liang said, his voice heavy with realization. The figure nodded. They fear you. They fear what you represent. And that is precisely why you must succeed. Liang's mind raced. He had trained his entire life for moments like this, moments where the balance between action and inaction could shift the tides of history. But this was different. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. Before he could respond, a sudden roar erupted from the crowd. The massive holographic screen flickered, and the syndicate's emblem, an imposing, metallic symbol, flashed across it, accompanied by a stern voice. Enough of this charade! The tournament is over. We will not allow Earth's champion to continue. The arena lights dimmed as heavily armed syndicate enforcers began descending onto the battlefield, their energy rifles aimed directly at Liang. The figure in the mask took a step back, blending into the shadows once more. Liang remained where he stood, his heart pounding, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The enforcers closed in, their weapons charging. The crowd was in a frenzy, confused and uncertain, their excitement turning to fear. The masked figure's voice whispered one final time, so soft that only Liang could hear it. The choice is yours, monk. Fight the battle they expect, or the one they fear. And with that, the figure vanished, leaving Liang standing alone, the enforcers just steps away, their rifles trained on him. The monk's hands clenched at his sides. He had mere seconds to decide. Was this still just a fight? Or was it the start of something far bigger? The energy rifles hummed with lethal intent as the syndicate enforcers closed in. Their black armor gleamed under the dim lights of the arena, each step they took synchronized, deliberate. The crowd, which had moments before been roaring with excitement, now watched in stunned silence. The tension hung heavy in the air as if everyone was waiting for the moment it would snap. Liang's heart beat steadily, his mind racing through the possibilities. He stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, his senses attuned to the energy that rippled around him. This wasn't the fight he had trained for. It wasn't the tournament he had prepared to win. This was something far more dangerous, far more significant. The masked figure's words still echoed in his mind. The choice is yours, monk. Fight the battle they expect, or the one they fear. The syndicate enforcers fanned out, forming a tight circle around Liang. Their rifles remained trained on him, but they hadn't fired. Not yet. Liang could feel their hesitation, their uncertainty. They had been ordered to stop him, but even they could sense there was more to this than a simple takedown. One of the enforcers stepped forward, their helmet's visor glowing red. Surrender! Their voice boomed, cold and mechanical. This fight is over. You have no further purpose here. Liang's gaze met the enforcer's visor, but he said nothing. His silence only seemed to unnerve them more. "We will use force if necessary," the enforcer added, though there was an unmistakable edge of doubt in their voice. Liang knew what he needed to do. He could feel it deep in his core. This wasn't about physical combat anymore. It was about exposing the truth, unraveling the tangled web of lies the syndicate had spun for so long. His decision, however, came with immense risk. The masked figure had revealed the truth of this tournament, a distraction meant to manipulate the galaxy's view of Earth. Winning wasn't the goal anymore. Dismantling the syndicate was. He took a slow breath, feeling the energy around him, drawing on his years of discipline and training. "I do not need to fight," he said quietly, but his voice carried through the arena with a weight that silenced even the enforcers. The lead enforcer hesitated for a moment, then raised their rifle, the energy building in its chamber. "Then you leave us no choice." Liang moved before the enforcer could pull the trigger. In a blur of motion, he closed the distance between them, his hand outstretched. But instead of striking, Liang placed his palm on the enforcer's chest plate, sending a pulse of chi directly into the suit's power core. The suit flickered, and the enforcer stumbled back, their weapons sparking uncontrollably. The crowd gasped as the enforcer fell to one knee, their suit temporarily disabled, but unharmed. Liang hadn't attacked. He had only neutralized the threat. "Stop him!" another enforcer shouted, and the circle tightened. Rifles aimed, triggers ready. But Liang didn't flinch. He moved again, faster this time, weaving through the enforcers like a shadow. His hands moved with the grace and precision of his training, each touch disabling a rifle, each step disarming an enforcer. The arena floor became a flurry of motion as the monk danced between his opponents, never striking them, only disrupting their armor's systems with pulses of energy, leaving them powerless but unharmed. The crowd, once again on their feet, watched in awe. This wasn't the brute force they were used to. This was something entirely different, a display of skill, discipline, and control they had never seen. But as Liang disabled the last enforcer, his senses flared with a sudden realization. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning. The ground beneath his feet trembled. The arena's lights dimmed further, plunging the space into near darkness. High above, the holographic screens flickered and went black. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Liang looked up, his eyes narrowing. He could feel it, something was coming. And then it appeared. A massive figure descended from above, slowly lowering into the arena. It was an exo-suit, but unlike anything Liang had encountered before. Towering at least 15 feet tall, its frame was covered in a dark, metallic sheen that seemed to absorb the light around it. Massive cannons were mounted on each arm, and its chest bore the emblem of the syndicate, a twisted symbol of control and power. Inside the suit, a figure loomed, barely visible through the thick, reinforced visor. But Liang could sense it, the presence within. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a weapon, a living embodiment of the syndicate's might. The crowd gasped as the suit's cannons powered up, their energy humming with destructive force. "Monk!" A voice boomed from within the suit, amplified and distorted by the machinery. "You think you can expose us? You think you can stop what's coming?" Liang's pulse quickened, but he remained calm. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His path was clear now. The masked figure had given him the truth, but it was up to Liang to reveal it to the galaxy. The suit's cannons aimed directly at him. The ground shook beneath its weight, and the tension in the arena reached a fever pitch. "You were a fool to believe you could make a difference," the voice continued, mocking and cold. "This ends now." The cannons fired, twin beams of energy surging toward Liang with terrifying speed. But Liang was ready. His hands moved in a blur, his body shifting as he redirected the flow of energy around him. The beams crackled through the air, but instead of striking him, they veered off course, arcing around him like water flowing over stone. The crowd erupted in shock as the energy dissipated harmlessly into the arena floor. For the first time, the figure inside the exo-suit hesitated. "Impossible," they muttered. Liang's eyes locked onto the massive suit, his mind clear. He had trained for this moment his entire life, not just to fight, but to dismantle the very systems that held others in chains. The energy around him pulsed, and he stepped forward, ready to face this final challenge. But as he moved, a new sound pierced the air, sharp, piercing. An alarm, coming from the arena's control tower. And then, a voice, frantic and terrified, echoed across the arena. "Unknown ships detected! They're breaking through the defense grid!" Liang's gaze snapped upward, toward the sky beyond the arena's walls. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. Something far worse was coming. The figure inside the exo-suit tensed, their voice turning to fury. "You've doomed us all, monk!" The alarm blared through the arena, its shrill wail cutting through the stunned silence of the crowd. Above, the once clear sky now churned with the ominous silhouettes of approaching ships. Liang's eyes followed the sound, his senses immediately attuned to the shift in the atmosphere. He could feel it, the tension, the impending danger, radiating from the sky like a physical force. The syndicate enforcer inside the exo-suit clenched their fists, their voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "This wasn't supposed to happen," they muttered, their voice distorting through the suit's speakers. "You've drawn them here." Liang remained silent, his body still poised, but his mind raced. The situation had escalated beyond the confines of the arena. Whatever unknown threat approached, it wasn't just after the tournament or the syndicate. It was bigger, far bigger than any single battle. The crowd, once roaring with excitement, now shifted to panicked murmurs. Fear rippled through them, their confusion amplifying as the ships grew larger, their shapes distinct against the roiling clouds. Soldiers in the stands scrambled to their feet, issuing commands into their communicators, while syndicate enforcers readied their weapons, all aimed toward the sky. "You did this!" the enforcers shouted, their rage palpable. "You've doomed us all with your arrogance. Do you even know what's coming?" Liang's gaze never wavered from the ships above. His voice, when it came, was calm but laced with a steely resolve. "This has always been bigger than the tournament. You know that. The syndicate's grip on the galaxy is slipping, and they will face the consequences of their corruption." The enforcer's laugh was bitter. "Consequences? You fool! This isn't about the syndicate anymore. Those ships, they're here to destroy everything. The syndicate, your precious Earth, and you." Liang's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. He could feel the truth in the enforcer's words, the weight of the threat bearing down on them all. This was no ordinary attack, it was annihilation. The crowd erupted into chaos as the ships began to descend. Beams of light shot from the vessels, scanning the arena floor with an eerie precision. The temperature dropped, and a cold wind swept through the arena, sending shivers down the spines of every spectator. The enforcers scrambled to regroup, their once confident stance now shaken by the sheer scale of what was coming. Liang took a deep breath, centering himself amidst the growing storm. The energy around him felt volatile, shifting, as though the balance of the entire galaxy was on the verge of collapse. His hands moved slowly, his fingers tracing invisible lines in the air as he prepared to harness the chi that flowed through him. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was the moment the masked figure had warned him about. The first ship fired. A beam of blinding white light shot from the lead vessel, aimed directly at the center of the arena. The ground beneath Liang trembled as the beam scorched the earth, sending cracks spiraling outward in all directions. The crowd screamed, surging toward the exits in a desperate attempt to flee, but the arena's energy shields locked into place, trapping them inside. Liang moved with a speed that defied reason, his body a blur as he dodged the beam. He felt the heat pass inches from his skin, the air shimmering with its deadly force. The enforcer in the exo-suit wasn't so lucky. The beams slammed into them, shattering their armor with a deafening explosion. The force sent debris flying through the air, and when the dust settled, the once imposing suit lay crumpled, smoke rising from its remains. Liang didn't flinch. His focus sharpened as he turned his attention back to the ships. He knew, instinctively, that this was a battle he couldn't win with brute strength alone. His mind raced, calculating every possible move, every path he could take to expose the truth the syndicate had buried. But first, he had to survive this. A voice crackled through the arena's speakers, cold, commanding, and devoid of emotion. Earth's champion. Surrender now, and perhaps we will spare what remains of your world. Liang's gaze flickered toward the source of the voice, his expression unreadable. I don't fight to surrender, he called back, his voice cutting through the chaos. And Earth does not fear your threats. The response was immediate. The ships shifted, their cannons swiveling to focus on Liang alone. He could feel the energy building in the air, the unmistakable tension of a weapon about to fire. But just as the cannons powered up, something unexpected happened. The arena's lights flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The ships above halted, their beams stuttering as if something had interrupted their power flow. The cold wind ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness that spread across the arena like a suffocating blanket. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, from the shadows of the arena, a figure emerged. Liang's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the silhouette. The masked figure, cloaked in darkness, stepped into the light once more. They moved with a purpose, their presence commanding attention. But this time, they weren't alone. Behind the figure, more shadows moved, silent, swift, and deadly. Warriors, each cloaked in the same dark fabric, their faces hidden behind similar silver masks. They spread out across the arena, surrounding Liang, their movements synchronized like a perfectly choreographed dance. The masked figure stopped a few feet from Liang, their voice low but clear. You're not alone in this fight, monk. The galaxy may not know it yet, but today marks the beginning of something far greater than the syndicate. Liang's pulse quickened. Who are they? He asked, his gaze flicking toward the masked warriors. They are the ones who refuse to be controlled. The figure replied, their tone heavy with meaning. The ones who see the truth behind the syndicate's lies. And they're here to ensure the galaxy never forgets what happens when power corrupts absolutely. The ground trembled once more as the ships above powered up again, their cannons turning to face the new threat. The masked figure stepped forward, their hand raised, a silent signal to their warriors. We fight together, they said, their eyes locking with Liang's through the mask. Or we fall. The air crackled with energy as the first ship fired again, the beam of light hurtling toward the center of the arena. Liang's muscles tensed, his senses on high alert. The battle for the galaxy's future had just begun. And everything hinged on what came next.